This presentation will focus on how we can identify the butterflies found in Northern Ireland. And within Northern Ireland, we get 25 species of butterfly which we regularly find here. Most of them are here year-round, yet others are completely migratory, such as the painted ladies, and they can survive our winters. We also get occasional migrant species which aren't yet known to breed here anymore, such as the brimstone butterfly, but they can be seen occasionally every year. But the rest of this class will focus on the most common and widespread butterfly species we get in Northern Ireland. For example, with the brown butterflies, we are only going to focus on 4 of the 7 brown species which are found in Northern Ireland. These are the ones you're likeliest to see, and you might pick up the other species over time. And we'll start by looking at some of the species groups. The first species group we'll look at are the white butterflies, and this includes 5 species we get in Northern Ireland. The larvae of most of these feed upon plants within the Brassica family. These can be wildflowers or cultivated plants such as cabbage. The exception to this would be the Cryptic Wood-white species, which doesn't feed upon brassicas. Then the next species group are the Lycaenidae, and this is from the Greek for she-wolf. Nobody knows how they got that name, but this is the name we use now for this group of small to medium-sized butterflies. In Northern Ireland, there's 1 copper species, the small copper. There are 3 blue species and 2 hairstreak species. All of these are medium to small sized butterflies, and they have special scales on their wings so that they actually reflect back a lot of light. So whenever you see them in flight, they can have a shimmery appearance, and it's only when they land that you might notice some of these beautiful bright colors that they have. The larvae of these feed upon a variety of different types of plants and often look very similar to the parts of the plant that they feed upon. The next species group then are the brown butterflies. This includes small heath, ringlet, meadow brown, and speckled wood. These will be the commonest ones. And these generally all look brown or orange in appearance and have varying amounts of eye spots on their wings. And the caterpillars of these species all feed upon grasses. The next major group I want to look at then will be the Vanessids, and these include some of the most common garden butterfly species. They're all medium to large in size, and they're often very brightly coloured, as you can see from some of the photographs here. The larvae of these will mostly feed upon stinging nettles, whereas the caterpillars of the painted ladies will tend to feed upon thistles. Now, within the group called the Fritillaries, there are only 2 species in Northern Ireland. This includes the silver wash fritillary. It's our largest resident species of butterfly found in Northern Ireland, and it's mostly coastal, but also found in Fermanagh. And the Marsh Fritillary, which tends to be found in damp grassland. Then within the skippers, this is an unusual group of small butterflies. They have relatively large heads, very big eyes, and hooked antennae, as you can see in the photograph here. And an interesting thing about this group as well is that they have these curved eyelashes covering their very large eyes. In this photograph here, you can also then see the hooked antennae as well. The only skipper species that we have in Northern Ireland is called the dingy skipper, and it's only found in parts of Fermanagh, as you can see from the map here. Now I'm going to talk about some of these species in more detail. There's no need to remember them all because the idea is that I'm going to point out features for you to look at, and then hopefully you'll have a guide with you so you'll know how to identify them in the field when you see them in real life. And we'll start with the small white, and the first 3 white butterflies I'm going to talk about all have a very similar lifestyle in that they come out twice per year. They have a spring brood and a late summer brood. And the second generation often tends to be darker. So the small white will usually emerge around May and June. They'll disappear around midsummer and emerge again in late summer. And the way to look at this small white and to separate it from other species is to look at the grey tip to the wing. So we can have a closer look at this here, and you can see that it's a finer grey tip for a start, so it's not very dark usually, but sometimes in some individuals it can be darker. But the tip itself is mostly just pointing towards the head, so it's kind of like an acute angle triangle, and it doesn't extend far down the back edge of the wing here. The spots tend not to be strong, so sometimes they can be quite diffuse, like you can see here. But really don't worry too much about counting the spots because this can get tricky sometimes and it can differ between the sexes and different butterfly species. So please don't get too caught up on the spots. This butterfly also looks quite yellow underneath, and you'll tend to find it in gardens and allotments because it's one of the so-called cabbage whites, but you will also find it in more natural habitats such as along riverbanks and hedgerows and woodland edges. And a similar species to the small white is the large white, and these sometimes aren't notably larger than the small white, so size isn't always a useful feature. Similarly to the small white, it has 2 generations per year. And if you look at the black tips to the wings, you'll notice that they extend down both edges of the wings. So it extends both towards the head and around the back edge of the wing as well. And a handy way to remember the large white is that there's a big black L on the wing, as you can see here. So it's like an L for large, and it helps you to remember that species. If there are spots, they tend to be quite strong and vivid, but then don't get too caught up in the spots because it can differ between the males and females, because males have no spots on the upper wings, as you can see in the photograph here. They have a pale yellow underside, again very similar in some ways to the small white butterfly. And this species tends to be found mostly in gardens and allotments, and it's much more closely associated with those cultivated plants like cabbage and broccoli. Then there's the green faint white. Again, it has 2 generations per year, similar to the small white in size and habitat sometimes, and it can be variable on the upper wing. It will usually have some lined markings. Those can sometimes be very fine, like in the upper photograph here, where you see a dark fine line on the upper wing. But in other individuals, you'll notice that the dark line is thicker and much more obvious. So none of the other white butterfly species have this feature with lines on the upper wing. So that's a really useful ID feature to remember. And also, if you only see it from the upper side as well, and you're looking at the broken tip, the tip to the wing, you'll notice that it's broken at each section. So it is extending far down the back of the wing here, but notice how it's broken at each section by white, and none of our other butterfly species have that feature. But this butterfly is most distinctive because of the streaky grey veins on the undersides of the wings. Sometimes those are against a yellow background and sometimes they're against a plain silver background. But either way, you'll notice these strong grey streaky veins, which tells you immediately that it's the green faint white because no other butterfly has that feature. This butterfly tends to be associated with more natural habitats and isn't often found in gardens, so you'll find it at places like woodland edges and riverbanks. And now we're on to the orange-tip butterfly, and this is an exception compared to the butterflies we met so far because there's only a single brood per year, and that peaks in May. So if you ever see a white butterfly in late summer, it's almost certainly not going to be an orange-tip butterfly. So whenever they come out, they're very distinctive in the males of that species because they have these bright orange tips to the wings, and they're extremely easy to identify then. The females, though, don't have any orange, and you can tell them apart from other butterfly species because their wings tend to be more rounded, as you can see in the photograph here. Also, if you notice the spots, they tend to not be completely round. They're almost like tadpoles before they emerge from this frog spawn. And they've also got like a pearl necklace effect going out around the black tips to the wings. You can see all these little white dots going around it, showing you that it's the female orange tip. As well as that, both sexes do have a distinctive mottled green appearance on the undersides of the wings. This is a male here, but a female will look similar. And you can see it has these white patches against a background which can look green. So this is the kind of thing you're looking for with an orange tip. And now we'll have a look at one of the less common white species of butterfly, and it's one of our priority species for conservation. It's the Cryptic Wood-white. This butterfly is not found at all in Great Britain, but it is found in Ireland. It's almost identical to the wood-white butterfly. That species of butterfly is not found in Northern Ireland, but it is found in the Burren region of the Republic of Ireland. Now, if you're looking for the Cryptic Wood-white, you'll notice that they have a distinctive dusty white appearance to the undersides of the wings, so there are no distinctive markings. Overall, it's quite grey and diffuse. If you look at the shapes of the wings, you'll see that they're quite rounded as well, so they're not sharp like some of the other butterflies we've seen. The adults will always rest with their wings closed, so as soon as they land, they snap their wings shut. And they tend to be found in habitats like scrubby grassland, verges, and in hedges. And the caterpillars will mostly feed upon plants such as meadow vetchling and other plants within the pea family of plants. And this butterfly is on the wing from late April until late June. Now let's just compare the cryptic wood-white to some of our more common species. This is the small white we can compare it with, and really just to show you the difference in the shape of their wing. So the small white has an almost right angled triangle at the edge of its wing here, whereas in the cryptic wood-white, that edge is much more smooth and rounded, as you can see here. And now we're onto our first brown species of butterfly, and we'll start with the ringlet. This is quite a distinctive butterfly when it first emerges because they're quite dark in flight. Yet that dark colour can soon fade to a lighter brown as they get older and some of their scales fall off. The eye spots on the upper wing can be variable, and they're much easier to see on the underside, where you have these beautiful golden rings all along the underside of this butterfly, which gives it its name, the ringlet. It has a single brood, which tends to peak in June, and they're most often found in places with long, lush grassland, especially damp grasslands around woodland edges, and this is one of those butterflies which will fly even in overcast or even rainy conditions. Then there's the meadow brown, and in flight these might be mistaken for faded ringlets. They're roughly around the same size, only slightly bigger, and they're much more orange underneath though. So what you're looking for with the meadow brown is a butterfly which looks brown and orange as it flies, because you'll notice from the underside of the wing that it has this orange appearance just here. It's only got a single dark eye spot with a white dot in the center and no golden rings. So if you see the underside, it looks much plainer than that of the ringlet. And the upper surface is more variable. Sometimes it is very brightly orange and other times it's more plainly brown and not as distinctive as the one in the photograph here. This butterfly flies during the same time as ringlets though, but for a longer period, mostly flying from June until August. And it's often found in places with long grass in full sun, and these are usually drier spots though than those preferred by the ringlets, but they can overlap in their habitat preferences. Then there's the small heath, which is our smallest brown butterfly. It's only about half the size of a meadow brown, so it's quite tiny. And whenever you're looking for this butterfly, what you will see is a small orange butterfly flying through short grassland. And this butterfly is orange on its upper wings, but as soon as it lands, it closes its wings. So we've had to use a photograph of this poor butterfly, which is held in water here. And as you can see, the upper wings are completely orange, just like this. But you almost never see that when the butterfly is still, but you will notice this when it flies. So when the butterfly lands, you'll notice that the orange part of the forewing can be seen for a moment, but very often it begins to tuck that behind its hind wing and it can be harder to see. So it is quite a mothy looking small butterfly and it's quite easily overlooked. The heath name is confusing, so you can find it in lots of different types of grassy places, especially with short fine-leaved grasses, and it has more than one generation per year. So you'll see it flying from early summer, from May usually, until September, so you can see this for a longer period than the other brown butterflies we've seen so far. And it prefers dry grassland with fine-leaved grasses. Now onto our final brown species of butterfly, and we'll look at the speckled wood. This is one of our more common and widespread species. You'll find it, as its name suggests, around woodlands, hedgerows and gardens. These are always places with trees and shrubs with long grass underneath, because the females will be laying their eggs upon the long grasses. You can find this throughout the summer and springtime, so they have at least 2 broods per year. And they're very distinctive in appearance because they are quite dark on the upper wing, usually with cream or orange speckles on the upper wing, as you can see here. Males of the species will also take a prominent perch and they'll defend their territories from other insects by chasing them out. And now we're on to our next group of butterflies, the Lycaenids, and we'll start by looking at the beautiful common blue. Now, this is our most common and widespread blue butterfly species in grasslands, and it's distinctive from the male of the species because they have a beautiful bright blue appearance, just like this in the upper photograph here. So they're much more conspicuous, they fly more and they're very brightly coloured. The females are harder to find though usually, so they're usually more dully coloured and they usually have brown with a hint of blue. Occasionally though you will find individual females with a lot more blue on their bodies, and they sometimes have orange patches around the outer edges of the wings. The orange patches on the undersides of the wings will also help you to separate it from a similar species called the holly blue. That's much less common, and you'll very rarely find that in grasslands. It tends to be associated with woodland areas. The common blue will fly from June until September, and you'll find it in places with short grasses and coasts, where the caterpillars will feed upon bird's foot trefoil. And we can have a closer look at that bird's foot trefoil. So you'll see that it's bright yellow flowers on long stalks, and the seed pods of this plant give it its name of bird's foot, because the seed pods look just like the long toes of a bird, giving it the name of bird's foot trefoil. So if you see this plant, do have a good look for the common blue, because it could be there. Then our next species of blue butterfly is the holly blue. And similar to the males of the common blue, the male holly blue is also mostly blue on the upper wing, with just a black hint to the wings, as you can see in the photograph here around the edges of the wings. The females, though, are much more darkly marked, and you'll see these black tips to the wings, as you can see in the photograph, the lower photograph here. And the undersides will also help you separate it from the common blue, because the undersides are much plainer. They have a pale grey appearance with black dots and dashes, like you can see in the photograph here. In Northern Ireland, the species usually has a single brood, though a second brood can appear in late summer sometimes. They fly usually from mid-April until late June. And the caterpillars will feed upon holly and ivy, and therefore this butterfly is most often associated with woodland edges, hedgerows, and gardens. And I just want to compare those two butterfly species again, just so you know. So the common blue is on the left and the holly blue is on the right. Common blue doesn't have that dark tip to the wing that the holly blue does. And also from the undersides, you'll see that they're quite different as well, with the common blue having much more bright ornamentation here, whereas the holly blue is relatively plain. And also their habitats are different. Common blue tends to be mostly in meadows and coastal areas, whereas the holly blue will usually be in woodland edges, hedges, gardens, and parks. Then with the small copper, these are relatively small butterflies, rarely found in large numbers, and this could be because the males are quarrelsome and they will chase other things which are in their territories. So you tend to see them in very small numbers. And whenever the small copper is in flight, you might notice a small shimmery butterfly flying on a sunny day. It's only when they land that you can inspect them more closely, and you'll see these beautiful bright orange colors on the upper wing in males and females. You'll see them sometimes basking in sunshine on sunny hillsides, and this butterfly is another one with 2 broods per year. So they will usually emerge in April or May, and they will have a second brood which can fly until early October. So you can see this butterfly twice per year. And they really are often found in places with short grassland or disturbed ground, with places like with rocks for them to bask upon. So they like these sunny, disturbed places. Then there's the green hairstreak. This is our only green butterfly, and it's quite small, so it's about the same size as a small copper. And with this butterfly, the wings are green underneath, but brown on top, but you almost never see that brown. And whenever they're in flight, again, like the small copper, it looks like a small shimmery butterfly flying in the sunlight. It's usually only when they land that you'll notice these beautiful colors. And as soon as they land, they do close their wings, so you never see the brown surface of the upper wing. They'll sometimes chase other insects like other butterflies and others of their own species, so this is sometimes how you first notice them. And you'll often notice them in the places where they have their caterpillar food plant. The main caterpillar food plant in Northern Ireland is a plant called bilberry, and that usually grows at the edges of peat bogs and other acidic areas. You can see here the berries, the blue berries that this plant produces, but in springtime when the butterfly emerges, it will have its flowers, which tend to be red in appearance. So the green hairstreak is a nice one to look out for if you're around any peat bogs, especially towards the edges, because it prefers places which are sheltered from the wind but in full sun. This butterfly flies from late April until June, and it's a really nice one to get out and look for. Now we're on to our final group of butterflies, the Vanessids, and this includes some of our more common and widespread species. The small tortoiseshell then is common in gardens and parks. You can see them in any month depending upon the weather, but they mostly emerge in March and April when the temperatures increase. And in fresh individuals, you'll notice that the wings are fringed with blue, but overall this is a medium-sized, mostly orange butterfly, and in flight you'll sometimes see the lighter patches towards the outer edges of the wing. You can see these short black and yellow stripes, and you can even notice those on the underside as well. So when the butterfly has its wings closed, it's very well camouflaged, but you can just notice these paler stripes on the outer edges of the wings just here. The caterpillars of this species feed upon stinging nettles. And another one which feeds upon stinging nettles are the peacock. So you also get them relatively commonly in gardens and parks. Again, they tend to emerge in March and April, and the caterpillars do eat nettles as well. So this butterfly is quite distinctive. They're quite large in size, and overall they have a striking appearance. So the upper wing is very red with these distinctive peacock-like markings. So it had these big eye spots, which are like those of a peacock bird. And it can use those to deter or to distract predators. And this butterfly is actually known to rub its wings together to make a hissing noise to distract predators if it's feeling threatened. So you get a new brood appearing in late summer, and those will overwinter in dry places before emerging the following spring. And just like the small tortoiseshell, it's very dark on the underside, and it's almost black in places. Then there's the painted lady, a migratory species, and this is a relatively large butterfly. It's very good at flying, and you'll see them gliding along on warm days. Sometimes we get painted lady years when thousands of them arrive, and in other years we get very few coming to our shores. It's quite a distinctive butterfly by being a pale orange appearance with these black and white tips to the wings, so there's really nothing else like this. And the undersides are distinctive as well, because unlike the other butterflies we've seen so far, it has a pale brown appearance. And this is because this species isn't spending the winter in the UK and Ireland, so it doesn't have to camouflage itself to look like a dead leaf to distract predators. Then there's red admirals. These are mostly migrants as well. They can breed in Ireland, but it's thought that they rarely survive our winters. But possibly because of climate change, more of them appear to be appearing early on in the year, so they are possibly surviving our winters now. Like the painted ladies, they're very large butterflies and very good at flying and gliding on warm days, but we tend not to see them in large numbers until late summer. They're quite distinctive because they're mostly black with these red markings on the wings, and no other butterfly looks anything like this. Even if you only see it from the underside, you'll notice this salmon pink band on the undersides of the wings, which no other butterfly has, and that will tell you that is the red admiral. Now I just want to have a look at some of the other priority species of butterfly in Ireland, which are less common, but are very good to know. There's the Marsh Fritillary, which is a European priority species, and this butterfly is interesting because its populations actually exist as many small meta-populations with very volatile population sizes. So sometimes they go extinct, but then they recolonize. They go extinct because they're often affected by parasitic wasps, which can lay their eggs inside their caterpillars, and these wasps can wipe out entire populations. So that it's very important for this butterfly to exist on an extensive habitat network so that it can recolonize whenever individual populations go extinct. In Northern Ireland, they are fairly widely distributed, but this butterfly is never common in most places. You'll see the strongest populations tend to be in places like Fermanagh, North Armagh, there's some up at the coast, north coast here, and also in County Down as well. The distribution of Marsh Fritillaries have declined by 50% since the 1970s, but before then there were huge losses, so this is one of our top priorities for conservation work. The adults will fly from May until June, that's when you can see them flying around, and they'll be in damp grasslands because their caterpillars will feed upon a plant called devil's bit scabious, which will only grow in these damper places. You can see the flowers of the devil's bit scabious there, but the caterpillars will be feeding upon the leaves, and for a while when they're caterpillars, they will be living in groups in webs around the bases of the plants, and you can find these webs in late summer and in early spring. And others you might want to keep an eye out for are the small blue. Now this species of butterfly was thought extinct in Northern Ireland until it was rediscovered in Fermanagh in 2017. The caterpillars of this species feed upon kidney vetch, and they require sunny places with bare ground or sand and places for the butterflies to bask. Now, if you're going to look for this butterfly anywhere in Ireland, it might be better to go and look for them in places like coastal Donegal and Sligo, or the coast north of Dublin, where it's much easier to find this species there. Then there's the wall butterfly, and again this is another one which was thought to be extinct in Northern Ireland, but several of them were found at Dundrum Castle in 2021, so it's indicating that there's possibly a breeding population here again. They're probably mostly in coastal areas if they're anywhere in Northern Ireland, so it's one really to keep an eye out for, and it's very distinctive by being a medium to large sized butterfly with a mostly orange upper wing. Then we also have graylings here. Similar to the wall brown, it's mostly coastal in Ireland, and it can be very difficult to see these butterflies because as soon as they land, they close their wings and they're extremely well camouflaged against sand or gravel or grit, and it can be really hard to see these, but they're very much worth looking for. Then there's the large heath. It's one of our other priorities in Northern Ireland, and this is a butterfly associated with lowland bogs as well as upland bogs. The caterpillars of this butterfly feed upon hare's tail cotton grass, and the Northern Ireland populations tend to have spots on the undersides of the wings, which is how you can separate it from the small heath, because the small heath doesn't have any spots. But you can see here the black spots on the underside of the large heath will tell you that it's that species, because there isn't a great difference in their size. However, they are usually found in different habitats, with the small heath preferring drier spaces. You can see from the map here that it's mostly distributed in the west of Northern Ireland, and you're really looking for it in these wetter places, these boggy habitats. Then there's the comet. So this butterfly is becoming more common and is beginning to increase its range, but in Northern Ireland we only get a few records per year. It's a distinctive species by having a ragged outline to the wings, like you can see here. It's mostly orange on the upper wing with just a few black markings. And if you see it from the underside, you'll see how the species gets its name. It has a white comma shape on the underside of its wing, giving the comma its comma name. But also you'll notice how well camouflaged it is. So as soon as this butterfly closes its wings, it looks just like a dead leaf, and therefore predators such as birds would find it hard to find this butterfly. They're most often seen around the edges of woodlands, and the caterpillars of this species also eat nettles. The adults will overwinter, so you tend to see them in springtime, then they disappear in midsummer, and there'll be a second emergence of them in late summer. They were found at Castle Espy in 2020, so it's definitely one to keep your eye out for because they are rapidly increasing in other parts of the UK and Ireland. Now, if you want to find out any more about any of the butterflies talked about today, you can look at some of these guides, including the Pocket, A Guide to Butterflies of Great Britain and Ireland, or the Life Cycles of British and Irish Butterflies book. It's much more of a text book. It's very detailed, but it's well worth getting a book like this. So thank you very much for listening to this talk. Once again, I want to thank our funders at the Northern Ireland Environment Agency for funding our work in Northern Ireland.